Okay, first off, if everybody would make sure that your phones are on vibrate. Appreciate that. Ms. Baird, would you call the roll, please? I'm going to call this meeting to order here at 6:06.
Okay. Let's see. Alderman Walters?
Here.
Alderman Hunt?
Here.
Alderman Azier? Alderman Green?
Here.
Alderman Myers?
Excused.
Okay. Alderwoman Emerson?
Here.
Alderwoman Mary Jane Van Busker?
Here.
Alderman Bill Van Busker?
Here.
Alderwoman Mims? And Alderman Ward?
Mr. Ward's excused.
Okay.
Okay. We have before us approval of the June 16, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes.
Committee of the Whole.
Committee of the Whole, same thing. I hear
Is there a motion?
motion? Anybody?
So move.
Okay.
Miss Mary Jane, you got the motion. Second by Miss Emerson. Call the roll, please.
Mary Jane Van Buskirk?
Yes.
Alderwoman Emerson?
Yes.
Alderman Green?
Yes.
Alderman Bill Van Buskirk?
Just the red.
Yes.
Alderman Hunt?
Yes.
Let's see. Alderman Walters?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, next is CID Fundamentals and City's ongoing role. Point of contact is Jennifer Baird. What do you have for us, ma'am?
Mr. Mayor, we have a little bit of technical difficulties, but as of right now, the PowerPoint is up and running on the west wall.
Please note Miss Mims has arrived.
One second here, let me do that. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So tonight, just for a few minutes, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about community improvement districts. One of the reasons for bringing this forward is that at the Missouri legislative session this year, at the last minute, in one of the omnibus bills, they put in some provisions to change the way community improvement districts operate. And so we thought this would be a good time to talk about community improvement districts, as well as when community improvement districts are formed. The Board of Aldermen, actually, there is a role that the Board of Aldermen has in the continuation of these districts. And so in the future, staff may be bringing forward certain things for the board's consideration. And so just wanted to thought this would be a good time to kind of go through some of this and just talk a little bit about it. Not really into specifics, but more just a general high-level view. So on the screen is the proverbial 50,000-foot view. Again, for the next few minutes, what I want to talk a little bit about is what are a Community Improvement District, or CID. I think most of you are probably aware. I also want to talk about just the types of improvements and services that a Community Improvement District can fund. What are the funding mechanisms? And just end up by talking a little bit about what the CID's continuing responsibilities are, and then where does the board fit in those responsibilities. So to start with, in Missouri, there is a whole host of various economic development tools that both developers and the city can use. I have on the screen here probably the most widely used. There's a lot more different programs out there. One we'll talk about in more detail is the Community Improvement District. In short, a community improvement district is just a geographic boundary, and the funds that are the CID funds that are raised within that boundary go to improvements that are within that boundary. So that's really what a CID is about. And a lot of times, people use various, they can use various, many of these different tools, like a TIF and a CID and a NID can all work together. So in short, on a CID, there's really three different concepts of how a community improvement district can be used. One is what we call as an on-paper CID. And what that really means is that CID is there just as a funding mechanism, and it's working in connection with some other economic development tool. Again, probably the one that's most common is having a TIF plan, and as a component of that TIF plan, you have a community improvement district. The other way that a community improvement district can be used is as a property owners association. So if you have several pieces of property and those property owners want to see certain improvements being made, they can kind of form their own group, if you will, and try and accomplish those goals, those improvements. The last kind is really a specific purpose entity. These are the types of CIDs if you go to, for example, Downtown Lee Summit. Those organizations, those property owners, they have come together. They formed a community improvement district to then make improvements to beautify their downtown areas. Liberty is another example. Their downtown, Excelsior Springs. Just recently, the city of Fayette did something very similar. So here, just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea. Under the statute, a community improvement district can actually help fund a whole host of different types of improvements. It can range anywhere from, landscaping. As you can see in some of those pictures, you see planters, you see light poles, just things that really unify downtowns. They can be used for convention centers, arenas, sidewalks, streets. The improvements are primarily, they are public in nature. So you don't see these CID funds being used to necessarily make improvements inside of a building. All these improvements really happen on the outside. There is an exception to this, and I'll get to that on this screen. So on this screen, continuation of that previous screen on the type of improvements, because there's really a long list of improvements that can be made. If you'll note that fourth bullet point under improvements, it talks about if the area, that the CID boundary, if within that area it's declared a blighted area, then those CID funds can be used to rehab buildings or demolish or renovate them. And that's because the legislature has determined that there is a public purpose in remediating blight. So that's why those funds could be used in that situation. In addition to improvements, community improvement district revenues can also go to a whole host of different services. So, for example, on the screen, what you'll see is you see the trolley car. In downtown Branson, if you've been down to their convention center, in that downtown area, there are trolley cars that are going all around, and that's paid for through a community improvement district. So there's lots of different services like that that the CID can pay for, as well as, again, more services, marketing, tourism, those types of promotions for cities and downtown. So now that we know that community improvement districts, one of the reasons they are so popular is because of all the types of different improvements and services they can provide. So the idea is, okay, well, then where is this funding coming from, right? And so here are, according to the statute, there's various funding mechanisms that a community improvement district can use to fund those improvements. What's important to note here with regards to the various options is that when a CID is formed, it can be formed as either a political subdivision, kind of like a city, or it can be formed as a nonprofit organization. So I've worked on quite a few CIDs. I can tell you that most of them are formed as political subdivisions. And the reason being is that as a political subdivision, they have the authority to impose either a sales tax or a property tax. So just like cities can impose a sales tax, nonprofit corporations can't impose a sales tax. So as you can see under the CID Act, the sales tax that can be imposed are in 1/8% increments all the way up to 1 cent. And again, it's only available to political subdivision CIDs. There can be a property tax. Again, that's only available if the CID that is formed as a political subdivision. Special assessments, that's another way that another option for them to fund. And basically what that is the property owners, through a reasonable calculation, they determine what improvements need to be made, and then they base, what's the, so for example, if they know that the improvements they want to make are $50,000 and there's 5 different properties, they may say, look, we'll just split the cost evenly among all the properties. That could be one way that they do that, but the assessment shows up on their property tax bill. So they pay it that through their property tax. There's user fees. So again, going back to that example of in Branson, how they have the trolley cars. There's a fee to ride the trolleys. And so CIDs can use those fees to help fund those trolleys. And then lastly, the statute allows for a business license tax, but that's only allowed in Springfield. And, every once in a while there's legislation to change this, but so far it has remained with Springfield. So the timeline, a little bit to understand with regards to the CID is that when they're formed, there's a petition that is prepared. That petition document is, in essence, that sets the boundaries of what the powers of the Community Improvement District are. Much like cities have statutes and the Missouri Constitution, which sets forth the boundaries of what a fourth-class city can do, that's what this petition does. And so by statute, the petition has to contain certain information. Some of the information, one is how is it going to be formed? Is it going to be formed as a political subdivision, or is it going to be formed as a nonprofit? The other thing that's in the petition has to do with how is the Community Improvement District going to be governed? It has to be governed by a board of directors. And that board of directors is anywhere from 5 to 30 members. And I can tell you on all the CIDs I've worked on, there's no 30-member CID that I'm aware of. That would be very difficult.
Wouldn't work.
But in addition the petition will also name the initial board of directors in the petition. It'll talk about how subsequent directors will be appointed. It'll talk about what are the funding mechanisms that will be used with regards to, what are the improvements that are going to be made. That type of information is in the petition. And then finally, it has to be signed by a requisite number of property owners. So once that petition is prepared, it's filed with the city clerk. City clerk then verifies that it meets or substantially meets the statute. And then there is a public hearing that is set before the Board of Aldermen to form that community improvement district. And so before the public hearing, there's going to be mailed notices to all of the property owners within that CID boundary, as well as published notice. After the public hearing, the Board of Aldermen will then consider an ordinance to adopt and either approve the petition and form the district or not. In addition to forming the district, a lot of my cities also enter into a cooperative agreement with the CID. And that cooperative agreement, again, the CID, when it's formed, even though it may be a separate political subdivision, it doesn't normally have a staff. It doesn't have a meeting location per se, and so what these boards normally do is they contract with the city staff and say, okay, city staff, can you help us collect the tax and help us with regards to whatever needs to be done. Also, after the CID is formed, there is the CID board that's named in the petition. They'll have their first meeting, and among the many things they'll do in that first meeting is adopt a resolution that imposes whatever funding mechanism they're looking to do. So if it's a tax, they have to put it to a vote of the people. And that election is really held, that election is for the property owners, or if there's a registered voter living within the district, that registered voter, they get to vote on whether to impose that tax, okay? And this is where that legislation changed this year. The legislature, at the very end of the session, adopted, like I said, an omnibus bill, and one of the things that they had changed is to say that instead of the election occurring only within the district boundaries, now we're going to open up the election to the entire municipality to vote. Now that specific bill actually got vetoed last week, but the veto session comes back around in September, so who knows what will really happen with regards to if the governor's veto will get overturned or not, but something to be aware of, because if that were to happen, more than likely you won't be seeing too many more community improvement districts formed. So after the election, then that's when the funds start to collect. So I wanted to give you that background because here is where it's really where your role comes into play. So after it's formed, there's going to be ongoing CID responsibilities. And this is, again, assuming because most CIDs are formed as political subdivisions, they're going to be subject to some of the same rules that cities are subject to. For example, sunshine law compliance. And that's something that would be addressed in a cooperative agreement on who maintains records on behalf of the CID. Again, a lot of times the CID does not have an actual physical location, and so the city kind of acts as the collector of that information. There's also has to be an annual budget that gets submitted to the board. The annual budget of a CID, per statute, their fiscal year matches the city's fiscal year. And so under the statute, between 180 and 90 days prior to the beginning of the fiscal year, the CID is required to provide their budget to the city. The city then has the responsibility of reviewing and commenting. Now, in some of the CIDs I work with in their cooperative agreements, sometimes the board delegates that power or authority down to a staff member like a finance director to review and approve. Again, I shouldn't say approve, really it's just a review and comment. The board can make comments about the CID's budget, but in the end, the CID board can approve whatever budget they feel is necessary. In addition to that, there has to be at least an annual meeting of the CID, and that's so that they can adopt their budget. In addition, there's certain reporting requirements that have to occur, not only to the municipal clerk and the Missouri Department of Economic Development, but also to the state auditor's office. And all these organizations they get notice of what revenues have come in for the previous year and what expenditures have you made. So, in addition, another really important aspect and requirement is, again, in the petition, it will set forth how successor board of director members are either appointed or elected. And so most of those board members, most of the time in the petitions, they will require the mayor to appoint with the Board of Aldermen to approve those successor directors. Also on the board members, a lot of times what I see is the city will require 1 or 2 members on that board to be city members. So that way the city is always aware of what is the CID spending those funds on, because those are public funds. And what are they being spent on? Are they being spent on public improvements or services? And then lastly, if there is a cooperative agreement, normally there's some kind of provisions in there about certain compliance, and so those are things that the CIDs have ongoing. So with that, again, I just wanted to do a real high level review of CIDs with you, but if there's some questions, I'm happy to answer.
Mr. Van Buskirk?
Could you expound a little bit on the legislation that was passed, that was vetoed again? I
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So
quite get that.
with community improvement districts, when the community improvement district is formed, if they want to fund their improvements through a CID sales tax, that sales tax has to go to a vote of the either registered voters living within the district, or if there's no registered voters living within the district, then those property owners get to vote on whether there's a sales tax within that geographic boundary. So what the legislature then stated is, well, instead of being just the voters within the within that boundary, we're going to expand it and say it's everyone in the municipality gets a chance to vote on that sales tax. So that's what that legislation was, and it was very similar with transportation development districts as well. They were included in that. And so, like I said, that was kind of thrown in there really in the last few moments of the legislative session. And so while there were some good things in that bill, there was also some harmful things, and so the governor has vetoed. And we'll just see what happens in September at that veto session. So
I'm sure that would make it difficult to form a CID if that passed. I might just mention, I don't know how many people here were on the board back when we formed a couple CIDs in the city, but as an example of a little bit of difference in a couple of them that we have, one of them is where the old Chrysler dealership used to be, and it was a blighted area. And so, of course, there is Chipotle and Aldi's and the GameStop and Jimmy John's in that area now. That is funded through a sales tax increase, a CID, but in that case, the city actually loaned money to the CID to form it and for the construction to be done and the improvements to be made. That's being paid back to the city through the CID when it's collected from those businesses there, the additional sales tax. So now in addition to that, it may also take care of filling holes in the parking lot, things like that. I'm not sure what all that involves, but the money is being paid back to the city. So that was an improvement certainly for the city, because we had a blighted building sitting there. Didn't look like anything was going to happen with it, but it made some big improvements came to that area. Another one is Sutherland Lumber. And Sutherland, theirs worked a little differently. They came in and made several millions of dollars in improvements to the building and the parking lot out of their own pocket. And then the CID was formed to reimburse them for, again, it's additional sales tax that's collected to reimburse them for those improvements they made out of pocket. So it's very advantageous for them, obviously, to stay there and stay in business so they can continue collecting that money back. But that's just a couple examples of ones that we've used here in the city, and people may not be aware of how those were funded, but that's the case with both those. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Buskirk. Anyone else? Okay, go ahead.
yeah, Alderman Van Buskirk, you bring up a great point. For those that may not be familiar with it, with the CID, yes, the shoppers that shop there may pay a little bit more And normally on your receipt, you will see a line item, it'll say the tax, but then on the bottom, it'll say CID sales tax. So you may pay a little bit more, but it does go towards those improvements. So, yeah, good point. So.
Anything else before we finish up with this? Thank you, Ms. Baird. Appreciate that. Damon, did you have anything to add? Okay, very good. All right, let's move on to number 3. Proposed discussion item for the Board of Aldermen regarding a proposal to set certain requirements for appointment to a city commission or board. Point of contact is Alderman Greg Walters. Go ahead, Alderman Walters.
Mr. Mayor, would it be all right if I step down to the podium? So I can look at the people.
Is it on? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll be brief in this. You all received the memo that I put out, which gives a very brief explanation of what some of the goals might be. I think it's important at the outset to point out that this would be an ordinance that would have to come forward from the entire board, so at least the majority of the board members would have to approve it. This is just a starting point. To give you an overview, I would like to make the following statement. All elected officials in the city of Raytown are required to have their tax obligations paid in full to be allowed on the ballot. I won't bore you with the language, but it's very clear in state statutes. In fact, this has been used in Raytown once where someone was removed from a ballot because they had not paid their property taxes. It is suggested language similar to the state law be created and made part of the Raytown's Code of Ordinances as concerns citizen appointments to various advisory boards in the city. Appointments to the Raytown Park Board, Planning and Zoning Commission, Board of Zoning Adjustment, to name a few, are required to have board approval of appointment before taking their positions. This proposal would raise the bar for candidates to the same level required of elected officials in Raytown. There have been some suggestions that members of the board from members of the board as well as from the Board of Aldermen and from the mayor. Alderman Mary Jane Van Buskirk suggested we include a question on application forms asking applicants if they are paid up on their property and sewer billing taxes. Mayor Michael McDonough asked if any other cities are requiring this. I've done a little bit of checking, and the only one that I found is Kansas City. I've been told that they require.
I did a little checking for you, so you'll know it took me 30 minutes. There's no cities other than Kansas City that require that.
Okay, well, I got lucky and it's the one I asked about. So that's pretty much the long and short of it. I don't know if you wanted to lead the discussion, Mr. Mayor, or?
Well, let's see who, Mr. Van Busker.
Thank you.
Why don't you come on back up here now that you give your statement. Let's run the meeting from here. Thank you.
Well, I agree with Alderman Mary Jane, and in fact, something I had determined probably should be done as an alternative to this, rather than passing an ordinance and requiring the same requirements as state statute relative to elected officials. I think in this case it would be more appropriate and just make common sense for us to just add that question to the application, just asking if has your taxes paid, and if they're not, you probably wouldn't be eligible to serve at this time, and you're not publicly
Humiliating.
You're not coming out with any public condemnation of people, and there's no, I don't like that when that happens. I don't think there's any reason for that, and this would be on the application when people fill it out, so they're aware of that. And I think it would, rather than us going and doing any checking on that, I think it would be appropriate to just take them at their word. Trust them that they're going to be honest in saying they haven't paid. And I don't think we need to go any further than that. And that would be my proposal. I don't know that we need to even to do that. What it would require, it might require a resolution, but it may not even require that. I think if we just, as a board, gave a head nod to, yeah, just add that to the application, I think that would suffice. And that's my suggestion.
Ms. Emerson? Thank you, Mr. Van Busker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a real problem to even discussing this now with so many people that have lost their jobs. They could lose their homes, and they may not be able to pay their taxes. I mean, they do this because they care about the city. And right now, I think it's insensitive for us to even be talking about it. I mean, I have a real problem because there's so many people that are right now are having such a difficult time. That's all I have to say.
There we go. Well, first I didn't know that there was a current epidemic of people knocking down the door to volunteer for committees, number one, because newsflash, there's not. Obviously it's hard enough to try to find new blood for some of these committees as well. I know Ms. Van Buskirk, I think, expresses a similar thought when her and I spoke the other day. I also didn't know, wasn't aware that there was an epidemic of people that are currently on these volunteer committees, these city volunteer committees that are behind on their taxes. What's ironic to me is that one of the individuals that's really pushing this is currently behind on his. But that's a whole nother story. I mentioned that last meeting. Fortunately, ain't here to talk about it. Anyway, these are volunteers. I agree with Mr. and Mrs. Alderman Van Buskirk. It seems like you can have a simple question so that they know. Oh yeah, by the way, this needs to be handled to avoid any type of embarrassment situation like that. Like you said, Alderman Van Buskirk, I don't think this needs to be some kind of ordinance or anything like that. You have a simple question on the application process so these folks know, save embarrassment, avoid the political games, and I'd be in support of what you folks said, but at any rate, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think it is important, and I think it sets a good example if your taxes are paid. I understand what Alderman Emerson is saying. And, if they want to serve on a committee and they have the right heart, and they put a notation on there, I am behind on my taxes for this reason. Okay, that can be taken into consideration. And we don't need to stand up here and say, well, did you know citizen so-and-so hasn't paid their taxes? No, that doesn't need to be done. But I think we're also missing the mark that we need to put more emphasis on recruiting new citizens to get involved in the city. You and I talked about this, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
And it doesn't need to be on the mayor's shoulders. What are we being elected for, guys? Come on, let's get out there and get some work done. Everybody, I'm sure, in your ward knows somebody that you could ask to serve on a committee. Get them an application, ask them to fill it out. Tell them it's important to get involved in their city. I think we really, as individuals, need to push that. I don't think, like I said, I don't think it needs to be in ordinances. We got enough ordinances on the books that, heck, fire, half of them we don't even know what they are, and they're not enforced anyway. So why add another one? And I think just putting the question on there, are your taxes up to date? They can mark it. If they have a comment to make, let them make the comment, take that into consideration, and let's move on. Let's get some new faces on these boards, folks. Let's take this seriously, and let's get out and ask people, recruit. Let's don't leave it all up to the mayor to do. I know it is his job, I think, to fill these boards, but I'm sure he would welcome some help,
That's my job, is to bring people for it.
but I'm sure you would welcome some help.
You bet.
So, let's get on the program, guys.
And you will see a lot more people coming up over the next couple of months, because I have gone out and sought and found some people that are interested, that are younger, and trying to make the boards all newer people. You know, we've had some people that just have been fantastically wonderful about serving, but they've gotten older, they've retired, passed away, things like that, and it's time to get some of the younger folks involved. You're absolutely right.
Can I make just another short comment?
Yes.
These applications that you pick up to fill out to serve on a committee, they make you feel like you're filling out an application to go to work for the government.
Oh, see, I knew you was, thank you. I got it right here. Okay.
They've got one online, it's a lot shorter.
You know, I mean, seriously, when I filled out an application to work, or to serve on City of Council on the Aging, good Lord. And one of them was, the question was, what is your qualification? And you know what I put on there? I'm the only one who's got a coffee pot big enough for the senior expo.
And you had a point.
Okay?
All right.
You know, I mean, seriously, we need to tone this down. I mean, some of these, yes, we do need to ask the questions, but some of them, come on.
We'll take another look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the one online is a lot better, but yeah, we need to be able to reflect on that, but we'll work on that. Ms. Bims,
Alderman Mary Jane, you got me coming on.
red button, please, red button.
Oh, red button? I'm sorry, you got me coming on my shoes, because half of what got on my paper, I got to look at you again and say how much we're agreeing. And it's something that you said in last meeting and the one before, how we need to work together. Instead of that, I got you, and get things done. We got a lot of more important things to deal with, honestly, with this. And if you see my notes, you're going to scream, because I said the application needs to be revisited and revised. And then I talked about that the volunteers, here it is, these are volunteers. They're not elected officials. They're in a whole different realm. And so when you go out there asking all these personal questions of them, and this here form goes to the mayor. That's the mayor's job. We vote him up or down what he brings forward to us. I know you remember the young lady that came before us, and it was so humiliating in this room, all the stuff about her taxes. And I remember, and I said, I talked to her on the phone, but I would never say what the conversation was about, but I did my vote. There's a lot of games that are being played, and I know y'all done read some of it already, that just even with my own. But there's so much that our staff can do when it comes to the limitations of looking up what they can and cannot do as far as your taxes are concerned. So I have a thing about revising. Bill, I can't believe I can almost kiss you today, because you just went there. You know, it was like, Mary Jane, you already know my love over there. So, but the thing is revise and revisit that form that we already have. Nobody needs that information but the mayor when he brings that information forward. And we're done. Now, that's my stance on all of this. So, you know, we just need to allow you, Mr. Mayor, this is your part. I don't know why we on it, but that's okay. That's where I'm at. Thank
Well,
you.
the only thing is, I agree with Mary Jane, if you all have people that you can reach out and touch and ask them to apply, I would appreciate it. They may not always get what they're looking for, but I can always use their talents in other places besides just what they asked for. So, and I've got a lot of people that do that. They'll say they want on this or that, and then when I say, well, I really don't have a space for you there, but I do have it over here, they'll take that without any problem. Mr. Van Buskirk, back to you.
The other thing I was going to say, I don't think it is necessary, or we shouldn't go back and look at people who are currently serving on committees or commissions. You know, I don't think that's appropriate. We don't need to do that. They're already there. They're serving. You know, that's fine. I think just to add it to the application, I think would be appropriate, an appropriate question to ask. And there are probably other questions on that application that do need to be deleted that really aren't, you know, they aren't that important. You know, what advanced degrees do you have? And, you know, some things like that. And quite often, that just isn't relevant to serving on the majority of those, at least. Right. And I tend to agree with what was it Ms. Mims just said, I think, that, I'm not sure we need to see all the details for the applicants. It's probably just something the mayor can review, and then he can bring the name forward to us. And, we can vote against them if we don't like the name, but other than that, but anyway, I think that'd be appropriate. And I don't know if it would be necessary to do any kind of formal resolution or anything.
We'll get to that here in just a minute, because
Yeah,
I think what we'll do is we'll just
think
give
it'd be
direction to the board.
necessary.
I don't believe we have to have a resolution
Yeah, I
or
don't
anything like
think
that.
so either.
I don't
Yeah.
believe so.
But I don't think an ordinance would be.
Is that correct? If we want to just give direction to the board to redo that, I'll work with them on that, because I think I very distinctly understand what they're trying to do, and then add that one sentence on there. All it takes is just us as a group giving the staff direction to redo that and add that.
Correct.
Okay, that's right. Mr. Walters, you are last.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to be very clear. In my statements and the outline that I gave out, I have not called for anybody to be publicly shamed for not paying their taxes. And I kind of get the feeling that some people were trying to act like they were defending that against that type of a concept. So that's not the case. I think Mary Jane's idea is a very good one of making it be known to people, have you paid your taxes? Because I really believe that people that are going to act in public service should set an example for those that they're serving in the public. I also think that as far as the length of the form, I don't know about why that is so complicated either, so I have no heartburn with that either. I do believe, though, that it would help if we let people know that, yes, we want responsible people to come forward and be there. I mean, I can tell you that I know the one position that was removed from the ballot was because of this state law. So these situations do happen where people are not qualified by certain laws in Missouri to be on there.
You're talking about elected officials.
On elected officials, yes. And what I'm doing, I was going to suggest that we're just merely setting the same standard for the public that serves up here too. And if we do not, I understand, I think Mary Jane's idea of asking the question on the form is a good one, because it pretty much says that, hey, you're going to be serving a public position, and if you have a good reason, like if your taxes are being contested, if you have if you're contesting your property value on your property tax and you haven't paid it yet because of that, that's understandable.
Or if you've lost your job, as Janet said, That's,
Even though I would think that most people, if they've lost their job, their highest priority would probably be able to find a job.
Tell you what, we're getting close to meeting time. You're going to be the last one, and then I'll say something and we'll move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have had a couple instances where people were publicly humiliated, and that has happened. That's unfortunate. One of them, I know, at least one, maybe a couple of them, came before we actually voted on those applicants, and it certainly didn't affect my vote because I didn't think it was appropriate to do that. And I went ahead and voted for those individuals to be placed. And I just, I don't think we need to have a situation like that either. So, all right, thank you.
Mary Jane Van Buskirk, I'm going to ask you to make the motion so that we have the wording that you're thinking of, since you guys were the ones that were bringing it forward. And I think it should be very simple as far as what you think. We'll work on the rest of it, but I think just to make sure, and then everybody can be in agreement as to how they think that should be worded, or around like it should be worded.
It should be very simple and straightforward.
Okay.
Have you paid, or are your taxes current at this time?
Okay, and I'll let the legal person make sure that the wording's just right, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understood, so there was nothing out there in anybody's news things or anything like that was stated as different than what it was. So what you're saying is very simple.
Yeah, just,
Okay.
If not,
Mr. Mayor?
if not, you could, if you would like to explain further, you may. If not, it's okay.
Very good. All right. So we got an idea, Ms. Baird, on what we want to work on, and Mr. Mr. Hodges, and we'll work on that together, but at least we know that they want that part to be very short, and it does, however you think it should legally be. Mr. Mayor? Hang on just a minute. That their application is, okay? So you made that motion to move forward and give direction to the board to rewrite the form and add language to that
Yes, and to simplify the
and
forms.
simplify it. Okay, very good.
Second.
All right. Second by Ms. Mims. Mr. Walters.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest that if you are doing that, you may give some thought as to which taxes you're talking about. Like, I don't believe it's income taxes should be appropriate to be in there or anything like that. Perhaps just those taxes collected by the municipality.
I think we'll let the staff figure
Well,
this out. It's their
that's why
job.
I'm speaking for them as well, sir.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
We probably,
You have a second?
sure. No.
No,
We would
we're not doing anything like that at all. We're not checking taxes, period. We're not, the staff's not gonna check taxes. We're gonna, as Mr. Van Buskirk and Ms. Van Buskirk said, made it very clear, we're gonna trust them when they sign that document that they're paid up, so.
Mayor Mike, Michael.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, Mayor Michael McDonough.
You can say Mayor Mike, it's okay.
Sorry.
I don't have an aversion to it like some people do.
We would just follow the replication of the type of taxes stated in the form. Or how it states, state income, personal, municipal, real estate property taxes, to use it to be a standard form.
So you're talking about, which part are you talking about?
Language referred to as follows, under the proposal from Alderman Walters. Unless you just want to say local and state
I
taxes.
just think it should be only personal property taxes and real estate
Yep,
taxes.
that's good enough. That's all we need to know. All right?
If I spoke out of turn, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we've had a first by Mary Jane, we've had a second by Ms. Mims. Hearing no other conversation, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Mary Jane Van Buskirk.
Yes.
Alderwoman Mims.
Yes.
Alderman Green.
Yes.
Alderman Bill Van Buskirk.
Yes.
Alderman Hunt.
With reluctance, yes.
Okay. Alderman Walters.
Yes.
Alderwoman Emerson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, motion passes, thank you. All right, do I hear a motion for adjournment? Mr. Hunt, was that you? Who? You got mask on, okay. Mr. Walters, Ms. Mims has a second. Let's just do this by affirmation. All in favor, aye? Anyone against? Okay, be back in here at 7 o'clock.